Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. A win's a win, right? Doesn't matter how ugly it was. NC State needed to snap this losing streak, get their first win in 2021. Happened against Wake Forest. Happened with 19 of their own turnovers, but Wake Forest, they had 21 of their own turnovers. Lauren, this was not pretty basketball.
No, and I think, I tweeted about it. I feel badly because I feel like I jinxed it a little bit because I was like, yeah, win's a win, even if it's ugly. And then, like, right after that, Devon Daniels goes down. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, now it feels a little different than a win's a win at this point because, yeah. I mean, to be fair, you probably would have felt the same way about it if that had happened, like, and they'd been playing well versus if they
Mm-hmm.
hadn't. But I mean, yeah, and yeah, it was pretty gross throughout most of the game. It was pretty gross.
Yeah, about Devon Daniels, they didn't really reveal a lot in the post game.
No.
They were up by double digits when he had a non-contact left knee injury.
Yeah.
I don't know, it kind of slipped on something. I don't know what it was, but he just landed awkwardly. His knee gave out, and he could not walk off on his own. So he was being helped off the court. He couldn't put weight on it, and they said he wasn't going to return to the game. But I mean, officially they can say that. But I think based on anybody who watched that injury unfold,
Yeah.
they knew that Devin Daniels was not going to come back in the game. It was interesting. Keats after the game, and even the players. I know DJ Funderburk addressed the media too, in that they were getting a bunch of questions about Devin Daniels, understandably, because that ended up being a tight game after he went out with injury. Obviously, he's one of their more important players, one of their veteran leaders. So it's like, okay, what's the impact on this? And the attitude was just like, yeah, look, we'll worry about that now. We'll worry about that later. It was very much a very
Yeah.
kind of consistent message from the players and from the coach Kevin Keats that look, we're just happy we won. We'll kind of deal with this kind of stuff later, but right now they're just happy they're off the schneid.
Yeah, I get it in a sense because obviously it probably felt good to finally get a win. I was a little surprised by that too, though, where it was like, yeah, wow, they seem, cheerier than I thought
Mm-hmm.
under the circumstances. But look, I mean, maybe they just think we don't know what it is yet. We needed a win really badly. We got it, and that's that. And that's understandable. Certainly. But yeah, because I mean, look, none of us are doctors. We play doctors on Twitter,
Sure.
but it's usually not great when something like that happens. And let's all hope that it is and that it's fine, but it's usually not. And so, yeah, I mean, hopefully it's fine. But I mean, look, I guess at the same time, they're not going to shut down the season. There's really nothing they can do. So even if it is bad, like, you just kind of have to keep moving. And,
Yeah, and
eventually they did that. They settled down after a little bit of a run by Wake after that injury happened. So,
that's kind of the MO of Kevin Keats. It's kind of a
yeah.
next man up. We use that term a lot with football, but the way that Kevin Keats wants to play, he wants to get as many people involved as he can. He wants to see the development of the younger players as well, and it's actually a recurring theme. Whether it's after the loss against North Carolina or even after the win today, they're going back to the amount of times they've been able to practice. They're going back to how many games they should have played at this point versus the actual games that they've played. It's actually something that Gilio and I talked about a little bit today on the show, where North Carolina has been fortunate that they have had a complete season. They've played, 16 games. They have not had their own COVID pauses. They've had some games in a situation where they've had to find something else, like the Central game or what happened with Notre Dame. But they've played the most regular of seasons in an irregular season, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Whereas others, even Florida State, who's one of the top teams in the league, they haven't. And you've seen the incremental building towards how Roy Williams wants them to play. And before the year came to a close, before they had another COVID pause, it Keats was kind of preaching teachable moments, like especially after the Clemson game. And things have just kind of gotten weird from there, whether it was a bad loss to Miami, obviously the pause, and then, of course, getting worked by North Carolina. But, maybe we're having a hard time still trying to process what all of this going on, all of this impacts teams individually. And while I'm not trying to make an excuse for NC State, it could explain why you've seen some of the not so. It's kind of discombobulated up until this point, even in this win over Wake Forest.
Yeah, and I mean, like, while I may have a hot take about how a team's season is playing out here or there, like,
Mm.
I wouldn't have a hot take on any coach this season, no matter what, based on what happens this year, pretty much. Like, I just really wouldn't, and especially a team that's been impacted by it like they have. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we could talk about how they're playing and like how they look and try to make a trend out of it and see what's going to happen in the next game. But if we want to talk about this in terms of like, well, what do we think of the job Kevin Keats has done? I don't know, man. He's doing the best he can. Like, who
Right.
cares? We're not drawing any sweeping conclusions from this. Like, no one's it's like this weird thing with, and we did this in college football some to a degree, right? But I think college football played out, and we've talked about this a little more normally, where
Mhm.
we were like, no one's getting fired in a pandemic. Guess what happened? People got fired in a pandemic.
Yeah.
But like, it's just, I think it feels even more absurd to do it in this college basketball season because it's just like, what do you want? Like, I'm sorry, they're playing. Shouldn't that be enough for some of y'all? Should they have just sat out the season if like a coach is going to get roasted on a potential hot seat or whatever it is? I'm not saying Keats, I'm just saying in general, like, too. Like, what? You're going to ding him for his job performance during a pandemic? Okay, cool. You do you. I'm not going to do that. Sorry.
All right. Speaking of like doing you, I'm not telling your husband, you know, what comparisons he should or you should not make. But I was a little thrown off by one of the tweets that you put out there today, specific to his thought on what was it, Carter
Carter
Witt,
Witt.
Carter Witt of Wake Forest, who has some curly hair. So I'm gonna go. What did he
I tweet
tweet
a lot.
here?
You probably have to
You
scroll
do
down.
you do tweet a lot. Jeez, what's going on here,
There we go.
Lauren?
It's
Okay, here
coming.
we go. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. So yeah, it reads: My husband wants me to buy a Wake jersey so I can dress up like Carter Witt because he thinks I found my twin. I
He said I could
really?
be the Trevor Lawrence girl, like on TikTok or whatever. Yeah, and I actually like I even when he saw him playing defense on a particular play, and he kind of was doing a little arm wavy thing or whatever, and he was like, oh my god, he even plays like the weird like flailing style of defense that you do, and it's true, I do play defense that way, which is very desperately and flailingly and awkwardly.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean that does track. That one tracks. But I wear a scrunchie.
So
His hair's curlier than mine.
his hair. I think this is the real test for Carter Witt and whether or not this is actually a thing that can be pulled off. I don't think you need to buy a Wake Forest jersey. I think he actually needs to put on glasses and an
Mhm.
ACC hat like you typically wear.
Okay.
Do you think we'll send that message over to Wake Forest? We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, somebody said take a picture with him. I'm like, we're in a pandemic, so that's gonna have to wait a year. But okay.
If I had more time, maybe I'll do this in the morning. I will Photoshop
No.
your glasses and your ACC hat onto him, and we'll see if there's a striking resemblance.
I think it's really just people looking at the hair. It's not anything else. I really believe that. So, I mean, it's fine. And I get it. But he is giving me and a lot of other women out there anxiety by not wearing a hair tie. Um,
Hmm.
and to be fair, his curls are tighter, that he has tighter curls than I do. So, like,
He
they do kind
does.
of
He does have.
stay.
He does have tighter curls, but
But if I were
I,
playing basketball and running around, it would be like, you know,
yeah, I think in the summertime we can get a better idea if the curls if the curls match in some shape or form. I also think he needs to dye his hair red. Maybe Eric would do that for him since he won't do that for
maybe
you.
he would. Yeah, look.
Just saying. For those who are
I
unfamiliar
don't know
with
if you have
this,
curly hair if you want to dye it red. Just
Brownlow's husband's a big Bucks fan, and there was a bet between the two that Brownlow would have to dye her hair red, but Eric apparently has chickened out.
By
So,
the way, my mom heard me talk about that on your show, and she immediately texted me and goes, "Have Eric dye his hair red if they lose." And I'm like,
ooh, mm.
"But yeah,
I like where Mrs. Brownlow's at on that one. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see you all this weekend, where we could see some rescheduled games. We could see some games added to it. We don't know. I don't. Or do you want to break down the ACC football schedule tomorrow, Lauren?
what football schedule? They're having
Yeah,
a."
the ACC football schedule is being released tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning on Packer and Durham. What are you not? You're not in the mood to talk about football yet? You're not ready
No.
to see a schedule in the middle of a pandemic that's obviously going to be adhered to?
I mean, honestly, I'll put it this way. If we're not at a place where we can play college football by next fall and be relatively normal, this panic room's going to take on a whole new meaning. I'm just saying. I'm gonna. I don't know what place I'll be in by that point if we're not back to a somewhat sense of like not completely normal, but normal-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna be.
Yeah, I'll be with you. I'll be with you on that one. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see you all this weekend.